I'm Dr. Howie Jacobson, and this is the Plant Yourself Podcast. Each week, I bring you a conversation with someone who's making a positive difference in the world. And for my day job, I help leaders and their teams master their mindsets so they can achieve great things. To find out more, check out the Mindset Mastery Memo, my Substack newsletter. You can find it at plantyourself.com/memo. And now, today's show. There's a meme in the form of a flowchart. It's a joke that tries to simplify life. And basically, it's whenever you see a problem, it's like, should it move or shouldn't it move? And if it shouldn't move, then you use duct tape. And if it should move, then you use WD-40. And I am thrilled to introduce you to the CEO, the former CEO of WD-40, who took the company from a small, relatively small US-based company to a global brand. And the reason I'm interested in this is partly because WD-40 is an extremely cool product. In fact, it played a pretty large role in my childhood in the form of their silicone spray, which I used to spray on the bottom of Frisbees because I did freestyle. And when you spin it and you want to spin it on your fingernail, when you silicone that thing up, there's much less friction, and so the spinning lasts longer, so you can practice doing different tricks. But I digress. The reason that Gary's on this episode of the podcast is that he wrote a book about leadership that is really profound. And how profound is it? The title of the book is Any Dumbass Can Do It. And in our conversation, we talk about what it means to be a dumbass. At first, I thought it was kind of a performative humility pejorative, saying like, oh, I'm not so great. But it turns out to be an entire philosophy of leadership. And I think what really excited me about having Garry on to talk about his book is that he describes workplaces to me in almost spiritual terms. It's about how do we make the world a better place through the work we do, through the things we produce. And we talk about, the workplace itself, but also the quality of the goods and what they contribute to other people, to the environment, to the rest of the world, and laying out a possibility for almost a reframe of capitalism into something that possibly could serve all of us and could be life-giving. I don't know. I don't know if it's a direct translation. I don't know how much the forms would have to change in order for this to be the standard of how we run the world and how we do business. But I do know that Garry Ridge's heart is a beating guidepost to a direction that can move us there. So I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. Without further ado, Garry Ridge, welcome to the Plant Yourself Podcast.
G'day. It's great to be with you. Thank you for inviting me along.
I'm excited to talk about your latest book, which we can see if for folks who are watching on video. Any Dumbass Can Do It. It's a provocative title, and when I first read it, when I first read the title, it felt like sort of performative humility, right? Like only a successful CEO of a billion-dollar corporation could say that about himself. But when I read it, I realized that actually the essence of being a dumbass goes far deeper. That it's actually not a pejorative. It's a way of orienting yourself towards growth. Could you talk a little bit about the idea of it being a dumbass?
Yeah, well, I often say now dumbassery is your superpower. And it really, the whole core of it is back to the point is that, we should know as leaders, we don't have all the answers. And if we can unlock the power and thinking of others in a safe and productive way, not only does that bring psychological safety to the organization, and it really does show the people that they do matter because they're being heard. So, yeah, I purposely, picked the title because I have a theory that I think we've proven that if you understand what the ingredients are and you consistently execute them within an organization, you can build cultures where people know and feel like they belong and know and feel like they matter. And there's a lot of writing about this, but we actually did it, and we proved that by doing it, you end up with a high performing organization where people go home happy.
So you talked about word belong and matter, and what's the origin story of those values being important to you?
So, I was given the privilege to lead WD-40 Company back in 1997. And our goal was to take the blue and yellow can with a little red top to the world. And from a marketing platform, we probably knew how to do that reasonably well, identify the markets, identify the end user needs, make them aware, and make it easy to buy. The thing that was really on my mind was, how do you build an organization that in reality the sun would never set on the company? Sometime, at any time, there would be people doing things. And how do you do that in a culture broadly around the world? So fast forward, in 1999, I was listening to one of my dear friends now and my mentor, Dr. Ken Blanchard. He was talking about a master's degree in leadership at the University of San Diego. And he said, most MBA programs get people in the head. We got to start getting people in the heart. And I thought, that makes sense to me. So here I am, CEO of a US public company. I went back to school. And that's where I was exposed to and was able to learn from Ken and many others around the power of servant leadership, and fortunately in a position to be able to execute it at the company. And so we did that, and the things that worked, we turned up the volume on, and things that didn't work, we turned down the volume on, and that's how we moved. But again, it was very clear that if it goes even back to Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization, the third rung of that is belonging or love. And a lot of organizations don't make people feel like they belong.
So this is a tangent, but I've got to ask, so when you went back to school, was this like an executive MBA program, or were there like 24-year-old grad students?
No, it was an executive MBA program. It was a 2-year program. I went to school 3 days a month. And it's a verified master's degree from the University of San Diego.
Gotcha. So it wasn't like back to school where everyone else is just young students who haven't done this before.
No, that was one of the benefits of the program. I was in a cohort of about 28 or 30 other people, everything from a judge to a minister of religion to executives that have, what I would say, had miles on the clock.
I find that fascinating because for me, there is a sort of an occupational hazard of whenever I feel like I'm good at something, as reflected back to me by the outside world, it gets harder and harder for me to see myself as a dumbass, as a beginner who needs to learn things. And I wonder, like, was for you going back to school, was there any of that around like, look, I've already proved myself? Or
well, I had a goal. I wanted to confirm what I thought I knew and learn what I didn't know. And that's why I went back to school. And a number of things in the program confirmed what I thought were my beliefs. But there were others that I probably needed the confidence of that academic rigor to really give me, the platform that I wanted. So, and even today, we are always continuous learners. I mean, as soon as we stop learning, just throw some dirt on us, we're dead. So, I get, that's why, we brought in the whole concept of the learning moment. We said at our organization that we were going to reduce fear by taking out the fear of failure and removing the word failure with the phrase learning moment. And a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So, there were just certain things that we did that I think were important that helped us along the way.
See, that is the learning moment idea as the way you structurally introduced it to the organization is so interesting to me because I work with people around neurological safety around, so if no matter what if it feels unsafe in the moment for your nervous system to say the word, to stand up in the meeting, to take on the project, you're not going to do it. And I tend to work with people as if they're atoms outside of an organization. And so I'll talk about, your nervous system can't tell the difference between fierce criticism and a saber-toothed tiger attack, right? It's the same circuitry and it prepares you for the same physical response. But the way you've described creating a culture in which there is no failure, there is no fear, there's learning moments, people's perceptions of words change, right? They actually can see that there's a difference between a physical, life-threatening attack and words that someone's using that may be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think we've got to be, better than I. But we've got to be really careful or really deliberate about words. It's like the word manager. We deleted the word manager from our organization. You come to work, Dr. Howie, this morning, and I say, "Good morning, welcome to the company. I'm your manager." Well, I don't want to be managed. So we replace that with coach. In other words, "Good morning, welcome to the company. I'm your coach. I know what it takes to win the game. I'm here for only one reason, to help you play the best possible game you can. I'm never going to run on the field and steal the ball from you. That would be micromanagement. I'm not going to go to the podium and take the prize. That would be taking away your glory. And don't worry about me spending a lot of time in the stinky locker room, because that's where I want to be. I'm going to get my shoes dirty. I want to be alongside you. I want to understand you." Quite a different mindset than "Good morning, I'm your manager."
Yeah, and just the word manage. It's like, how are you doing? I'm managing. That's not a really high bar either.
No. In one of the dictionaries I looked up, the definition of manager was manipulator.
Uh-huh. So you talk a lot in the book about the coaching habit by our friend Michael Bungay Stanier. What does it take for a high performer who rises up to a position of coaching, of having a team that they're responsible for? What does it take for them to shift into coach mode? Is it a hard transition?
Well, I think firstly, the transition is really describing why we're here. I often used to say to my leadership team, be under no misunderstanding. The only reason we exist here is to help those we have the privilege to lead play their best game. And to do that, we have to be coaches. So I think, again, it's really about how do you frame and reinforce the purpose of the leadership. And, I often said, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself, so there's a purpose. You're protected and set free by a compelling set of values. Now, a lot of people think values in the organizations are restrictive. I disagree. They're both They're both there to protect you and set you free. Then you say, then I learned something new, so now it's a learning organization, and I go home happy. So it's just, I think it's so sad that about 70% of people who go to work every day are disengaged. And whose fault is that? That's the fault of leadership, because we create these toxic cultures where people don't feel and know they belong, don't feel and know they matter. There's no defining purpose in the organization, and there's no values to protect them and set them free. And it's not a learning mindset, it's a fear mindset. So that's why this is simple. It's not easy, and time is not your friend.
Why do you say that?
Because you can't sprinkle fairy dust on an organization and change the culture. I have a friend of mine owns a chain of furniture stores out in Charlotte, and he has a lovely saying. He said, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crockpot approach. And it's so true. And a lot of leaders think that, that one training program that you do is going to change the culture. It's not. You've got to put the foundations in place. And if you put the foundations in place and you execute against those foundations consistently, you will build and have a strong culture in the organization that, again, if there's more people going to work every day engaged, the chances of a better outcome are much higher than if there's a smaller number of people going to work every day and engaged.
So one of the things that really struck me in your narrative is describing the process of identifying the values of WD-40, articulating them into specifics, and then putting them into a hierarchy. And as I was reading over the meetings and the offsites and the teamwork that went into this, I see there's very few organizations that would spend the time to do that they would stop with something that they could print and frame. So I'd love for you to talk about all of that. Specifically, the thing I don't quite understand for myself is how you create hierarchy of value that leads to clarity, as opposed to just having like, these are our 6 or 7 core values.
Yeah, well, the hierarchy or the ranking of them is very, very powerful, and I'll give you some thoughts around that. Here's a nearly clear example. Or this story is roughly right. So you're working in the company, and you're responsible for making decisions around the acquisition of raw materials. And someone walks into you one day and says, "Howie, g'day, you are going to be a hero today. I've got something to share with you right now. And when you run to your CEO's office, you're going to get a promotion." And Howie says, "Tell me more." So, well, I've looked at your formulation, and there's an ingredient that you use, and we have an ingredient that can replace the one you use, and it's tested efficacy is equal to, or maybe, may even be better than what you're using. But here's the exciting thing. I've done the math. And if you were to use our ingredient, you could probably drop $3 to $4 million to your bottom line. And, that's pretty significant money. And, you're a public company. Your shareholders are going to love you for this. That's a decision you should make. And how you say, "Sure, tell me more." He said, "Well, there's just one other thing, and don't worry about it, because, it's not something that other people don't do. And in fact, it's very common. You just have to put a little warning on your can. It's called a Prop 65 warning that says, ingredients in this can may be known in the state of California to cause cancer." And Howie says, "Well, thank you very much. I can't do it." He said, "Why?" "Well, it's common. You're not breaking the law." He said, "Yeah, I know, but we make decisions here based on values, and they're hierarchical. And our first value is we value doing the right thing. And our second value is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all our relationships. Our number 6th value is we value sustaining the WD-40 economy, which is about maintaining profitability and the financial health of the company. And we don't think that cancer-causing chemicals create positive, lasting memories, nor would it be the right thing to do. So I'm going to decline your offer." And the guy says, "Come on, Howie, this is a public company. It's profitability." He said, I don't think you understand what I just shared with you. Let me go and talk to your CEO." And Howie says, "You can talk to anyone you like in the organization. I have the authority to make this decision because hierarchically, we use our values to protect us and set us free." So how do you feel as the person being able to make that decision? Number one, you couldn't cherry pick the value. If they weren't hierarchical, you could say, "I'm going to make this decision because it meets one of our values." But because it's hierarchical, the things that are most important happen first. So that's the power. And I have to thank, my mentor, Dr. Ken Blanchard, for really showing me and the organization the power of these forced ranked values, so people can't cherry pick which value to use to make a decision.
And it seems like that's a wonderful living example. And I could imagine a company that had those hierarchical values, and someone would still, out of fear or ego or promotion or just dissociation from those values, still make the wrong decision. So there has to be sort of a living, beating heart beyond the exercises and the words, right?
Well, yeah, if it's very clear and it's communicated in the organization that this is how we make decisions, then most people fall in line with that. One of the things we did, which was really powerful, is as part of our coaching process, we used to formally meet with our tribe members individually at a minimum every 90 days and talk about how are they progressing around achieving their A, because we said we're not here to mark your paper, we're here to help you get A's. And then we'd ask them to share with us how they've lived our values in the last 90 days. So they'd give us real live examples. So by doing that, this became embedded in the culture and behavior.
And so that's you and the leadership team, or the head coaches, basically being dependable and trustworthy around this is important no matter what. This isn't just fluff when the economy's great, but this is something that's core.
Yeah. And it would not be unusual, and it was common practice when we would be sitting down discussing just about anything to say, well, we need to run this through our values just as a gut check to see that we're heading in the right direction here. And my goal was I wanted anyone in the organization, anywhere in the world, any time of the day, to be able to make any decision they needed to make without quacking up the hierarchy.
Right. I love the whole the big mallard metaphor.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
all the ducks that I've been seeing so many organizations where everybody's waiting for the big mallard, for the one who supposedly has the knowledge. And I think you have a wonderful line in there. I'm not going to quote it exactly, but basically that person tends to be furthest from the relevant expertise.
Absolutely, they do. Yeah. So, we want to, the best information is closer to the action. So we want to get close to the action.
Right. So one thing I noticed while reading the book is that I've been working in sort of corporate consulting for, quarter century now. I've become inured to a lot of jargon. Like a lot of jargon just sounds like natural language to me. And you shocked me out of it a few times by using real human words. That maybe the first example was employee engagement, which is something I talk about a lot. And you replace it with the word fondness. It kind of broke my heart a little bit in a really nice way. That like there's such charm in thinking about an organization where people are fond of each other, fond of belonging. Where did that word come from?
Well, I think a lot of consultants camouflage issue with confusion to make out how smart they are. And let's be real, we are actually talking to real people in real time. So let's not overcomplicate things. Let's make it simple for people to understand. Let's use words. It's like psychological safety. You have to think about that. What does that really mean? It means that I feel safe and I belong. So describe it like that. So, I'm grateful for those out there that have, highlighted the need to have organizations that, really do treasure and they have a people first mindset. But let's not overcomplicate it. We don't have to do that. We can make it pretty simple. So that's why dumbassery is your superpower.
And this idea of belonging, I think, especially after COVID, after the disruptions we've had around the political disruptions that are going on right now, I think it's almost like a thing, at least in the States, that people don't realize they have been missing. I've noticed it since moving to Europe, because it's very, very different. What do you have stories about people who come to WD-40 and are just kind of like shocked and awed by what it feels like to actually belong at work?
Yeah, when I was in my full-time role there, I would often go to people that had been with the company for, 60 or 90 days, and I'd say, "Did we lie to you?" And they'd said, "No, it's better than I thought it would be." And it gets back to this whole, community of and we had a just cause, and our just cause was a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. And you talked about COVID, what an experience we had. But we entered COVID with a very, very high engagement score that we'd had for many years. 98% of our people said they loved to tell people they worked at the company. My goodness. 97% of people said they trusted their coach. Now, their coach was their manager. Most people leave organizations because they hate their boss. And so we go into COVID and, we get into this new style of being able to make sure we're connecting with people and working hard on keeping the culture in place. In January 2021, I was not concerned, but I was wondering whether we were draining cultural equity in this new environment. So we went out and we did a pulse survey to see where people were. And the numbers came back and they were much in line with the numbers that we tested back in March 2020. Now, here we are in January 2021. There's still no real sign of hope. We don't know where the world's going. But one number went up. And and the number was, the question was, I feel safe and excited to be here in the company's future. And 97% of our people globally said that. And I said, how can they feel that way when we're going through this? And so we went back and checked the data and it was true. So we asked the question, why? And they said, basically, I feel safe. We are living our promise of a group of people that come together and protect each other. If I want to be anywhere right now, I want to be here. And a lot of people were also in the organization were saying, at least, when I do what I do here and when I come here, there is optimism and there is, this security around us that I don't have anywhere else. So I thought that if ever we were going to test the power of a strong culture, that was the test.
Mm. And what I'm also connecting it to the flip side of what you talk about later in the book, say the accountability and what you call the maniac pledge, that you can't ask that of people until you demonstrate it from the top during tough times, right, to lead the dance so that employees can reciprocate and say, I'm taking full responsibility for my work. I'm not coming in here needy or as a victim.
Exactly. Well, the maniac pledge is the antidote for a disease that runs through companies, and I call it the na disease, the finger pointing disease. And so that's why we designed or wrote the maniac pledge to give people a platform and the authority to be responsible, to take actions, to ask questions, to make decisions. And we talked about it a lot. So that's another piece of the foundation.
All right. And just to give folks who are listening a context, the first phrase of the maniac pledge is, I am responsible for taking actions, getting answers, and making decisions, ... And there's more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I'm responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I'm responsible for telling them.
Right. So one of the quotes I took out and put in my quote board is, our first accountability partner is the face in the mirror. And I love that so much, because as a coach, one of the reasons people hire me is they say, I want an accountability buddy. I want someone to hold me accountable, right? I have a personal trainer because I wouldn't work out as often or as hard without. And yet you're saying that one of the jobs of that person, or the gifts that that person can give you, is to allow you to grow yourself as an even more intimate accountability partner.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. I think that in the coaching work that I do, the first process is awareness. Are we aware of the behaviors that we're using, and are those behaviors creating positive or toxic cultures? Then the next part of it is intention. What am I going to do to change my behavior? You may have read about someone in the book. I'll just get him over here. This is Alec.
Alec.
Yeah, this is the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated. and I created Alec, or it could be Alice, to be able to talk about the behaviors that really create toxic cultures. And, this person has an ego that eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating an ego. They're a micromanager. They think they're corporate royalty. They want a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They want to control everything. They know it all. They have all the answers, even the wrong ones. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they do not keep their commitments. But if you're in an organization where servant leadership and you're practicing the behaviors that create belonging, the leader loves and involves their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent. They're connected with emotional intelligence. They spend a lot of time in that stinky locker room. They love learning moments. They have a heart of gold, but they've got a backbone of steel as well. They're champions of hope. They know micromanagement is not scalable. They do what they say they do, and they treasure the gift of feedback. So there's the comparison between toxic leadership behaviors and positive leadership behaviors.
Have you had experience with people coming in to WD-40 who may have been hired because of their brilliance or their market knowledge or their connections, who had to be reformed, who had to kind of turn themselves from the ego? Because what you described, your soul-sucking CEO, is kind of I would say the mode, the median, the average. So how do you help people shift that? How do you help them heal from that to Sam or Susan?
Hopefully they didn't get into the organization. If you were to go to our careers page, the first thing that hits you is these are our values. And we talk about how important our values are in the organization. And we quite open and frankly say, if you can't align with these, don't call us. So, and if someone actually gets in under the fence and is not aligned with our values, they kind of get voted off the island pretty quickly. Now, that doesn't say that hasn't happened, but we spend, I used to say, I can make resources available so people can do the best Excel spreadsheets in the world or do whatever. But if they don't fit the culture, then they're not going to work. And one of the worst things you can have in an organization is, this high performer who's really against the culture, because then everyone in the organization says, well, how we behave here doesn't really matter as long as you get the job, as long as you're a high performer.
So, but still, I'm going to push a little bit that I think all of us have, the Susan and the Alec within us.
Yeah,
right?
I did. I actually probably had many of those at a high degree of competency until the first class that I did in my master's degree was a class that really focused on who are you as a leader. And if you're aware of the DISC profile, I was a turbo D. Be brief, be bright, be gone. And I had to change that. And even through my career, I had to always be reminding myself of who I wanted to be. So I ask myself, am I being the person I want to be right now, and who is that person? And the reason I do that is because we are just these basic human beings bumbling our way down this pathway of life, and circumstances and individuals pull us off the path. And they could be the circumstance of greed or envy or whatever. And unless we realize that that's happening and get back on the path, we're never going to get to our destination. So I think it's important to be aware of that. And I often say, don't take your leftovers to people. You have to take a moment to recenter yourself. I could be in a meeting or some sort of interaction with you, and what happens if I leave that and I go to my next meeting and I'm only taking half myself to the next meeting? I need to refill my plate of who I want to be.
And one of the things I love, you talk about the discovering you're a high D and having to change your own behavior around the very high I. just to sit and chat and be intimate and to get to know each other. There's so much that I've seen around taking these discs or Myers-Briggs or any sort of profile and having it define you, as opposed to you're saying the exact opposite, that once you're aware of how you are, it's your responsibility to meet other people's needs rather than have them meet your need for brevity and conciseness.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't change anybody else. You can only change yourself. So if our role is to bring out the best in others, then we've got to be aware of who we are and what we need to do to help others be, just others step into the best version of their personal self and not get in their way.
So one of the chapters you talk about is paying attention to alarms and parenthetically, even false alarms. And I'm curious about, because you talk so much about safety and yet paying attention to alarms. It's almost like I'm imagining sort of everyone's underwater in a submarine and you're all listening to the ping, ping. You're aware that there's enemies out there. How do you see the dynamic between safety and, I don't want to call it paranoia, but it's it's a little bit of, sort of like being aware that there are threats.
Well, I think that I don't see that the alarm bell is something that is counter to safety. In fact, it may even make you safer. And in the story that I tell, where I had that realization, where I was sitting in my hotel room in London, and the alarm bell's going off in the hotel, and I'm choosing not to pay attention to it. That alarm bell was actually there to keep me safe because it was identifying a possible threat. So I think that, again, you can't blindly wander down this road of business and not listen for the alarm bells. But the important thing is to identify them and then really work out whether they are a threat or not. And some alarm bells may not be a threat. One of the things that we're suffering from, and it's at a high degree right now, is as human beings, we have a high degree of discomfort with uncertainty. And uncertainty is a series of future events that may or may not occur. And, how can we identify the possibilities of things happening and not happening? We can deal with risk, okay, but this uncertainty is really tough. So I think alarm bells are really, my story was be aware of what's around you and then decide whether it's something that can be harmful or not. And if it's not, move on.
Yeah, so I was finishing the book this morning, and then I checked the news, and there was an article about a Wall Street analyst who, right now, just to place us in historical time, it's been 5 days after these huge tariffs were announced, and the stock market tanked. And this one analyst is the one who predicted that the Trump administration would go through with these tariffs the way they did. And, a lot of others analysts were sort of blindsided or didn't believe it. And one of the things this guy was saying when he's trying to explain how he got it right is that in Wall Street, you're punished for bearishness. You're punished for pointing out alarms, basically. The people who are bullish, who are wrong, don't get punished. They keep their jobs. They get promoted. And so again, I'm coming back to like this foundation of safety and learning moments and no such thing as failure. I'm wondering if that makes it easier for people to say, hey, I'm worried about this. And even if it's a false alarm, like you said, like the story in the hotel, it was a false alarm. Someone left their backpack. But you say they correctly evacuated this entire luxury hotel because that was the right thing to do. And
yeah, I just want to make a point here. I didn't say fail. You used the word failure. No, it's not about failure. It's about identifying. So, failure happens. We know. In fact, WD-40 would not exist today if it hadn't failed 39 times. You know, the story of the brand itself is very interesting. Back in 1953, the company was called Rocket Chemical Company. It was based in San Diego, a very small company, and it worked in the aerospace industry. And there was a problem with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket. And the chemists got together and started to mix up formulas to see if they could solve the problem. And Formula 1 didn't work, and 15 didn't work, and 25 didn't work, and 35 didn't work. And there were 39 learning moments. And each learning moment was a contributor to the next formulation. And the 40th one worked. So that's why it's called WD, water displacement 40th formula. So, you know, when we say it's not about failure, it's how do you learn from what did or didn't work and amplify it for a better outcome.
And to me, that's sort of like an encapsulation of the entire coaching process.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like your gift of simplification is growing stronger and stronger. You know, what did or didn't happen, what did or didn't work, what do you learn from it, and what next?
Right. You know, and that's exactly what we did. You know, we said if you have a positive learning moment, amplify it so people can take advantage of your learning. If you have a negative learning moment, amplify it. So if someone is trying to solve the same problem or do the same thing, that they can benefit from the advanced learning you had.
Right. So you give a great example of learning when you first entered the Chinese market and you went to a trade fair, and everyone is gathered around to get little empty paper bags, and they don't want to take your samples. Could you share that story?
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. So it was, you know, way back when, and I was at a trade show in Beijing, and we have a small sample of WD-40 that really is the backbone of the marketing program, and we give the samples away. And basically it's, here's my product, please try it. If you like it, please buy it. And the Chinese word for sample is yangping, and the Chinese word for lubricant is lunoir. So I'm on this trade show giving away these samples, langping, munar, and nobody is really interested in my sample of WD-40. But over in the corner, I see a line of people lined up to pick up what looked like from a distance a brown paper bag with a string handle on it. And I thought, what's in that bag? So I walk over, I look, and there's nothing in the bag. And I think, wow, what the hell's going on here? Well, my learning moment was that bag had value. It was about the right size that apparently the guys and girls that were picking it up would use to go to the store to, you know, buy their rice or whatever they bought. And it made me think about the fact that, well, why don't they want my lubricant? So I went back to the stand and I, you know, had a conversation with my Chinese counterparts and partners there. And I said, we've got to find out why they don't want our product. So we did some interceptions straight away. And what we learned pretty quickly is they didn't need lubricant. They had dirty diesel oil to do their job. But what was concerning to them was rust and corrosion. And our product is a product that you know is fights rust and corrosion. So we changed our message, and we said, instead of here's a sample of lubricant, here's a sample of anti-rust oil. And within minutes, we had to have, you know, people on the stand stopping people pushing us over to get our product. So, you know, we could have walked away from there saying there's no market, but the real gold in that is, do you know your end user's needs, and have you bothered to find out what they are?
Wow, that's a fantastic story. And you also have a 3 questions that you asked about entering new markets, because right, you were brought on to expand WD-40 when I was, you know, a kid or in high school. Like, everybody in the U.S. knew WD-40, but you were tasked with bringing it internationally. And you have these 3 questions, and I've been in marketing and sales for a long time, but this is so much more concise and useful. You say, do you need me? Do you know me? Can you buy me? Correct. And I ran that through everything I know about sales and marketing, and it doesn't really leave anything out.
No, you first, do you need me? So, you know, a lot of people launch products against end users who say, I don't need you. And there's the story of Beijing, right? I could have gone into China, and because the product was known as a lubricant in another country, assumed that the end users there were going to think the same way. So I could have invested millions of dollars in selling this lubricant, and I would have not been successful. So do you need me? Do you know me is, how do I now make you aware of the product that I have in a cost-effective way? And then can you buy me? Is the distribution channels, are they available, and are they free flowing to be able to get my product to the end user in the most cost-effective way? So it's very simple. Do you need me? Do you know me? Can you buy me?
Right. So at this point, I kind of want to pivot a little bit. So we've been talking about sort of business and business savvy and acumen, and the idea of being a dumbass means you're a good marketer because you're curious and you're asking your market and you're not coming in, flaunting your own assumptions. But like for me, the core of the book was like, this is almost like you're on a secret mission from the Dalai Lama to see if what he does could work in a business organization. That as the book continues, and as you talk about refining your own mission, you end up handing the megaphone to Alan Mulally, and all he's talking about is loving and being loved. And it feels like that's where you've come to, and like this is what business is all about. Can you talk about that? Because that's kind of revolutionary.
Well, yeah, I guess it gets back to the point that, we're dealing with human beings, and people want to be appreciated, loved. They want to know they belong. And a lot of people think that this culture stuff is fairy dust and, it's all about popcorn, pizzas, and ping pong parties. Well, it's not about that at all. I have a dear friend, his name is Ron Carusi. He wrote a great book called To Be Honest. And he makes a quote that I really love. He says, most people protect their own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development. And, again, leadership is a heart of gold, a backbone of steel, a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. So, you create this organization where you do have a deep care for your people, a deep love for your people, because you want them to be successful human beings. And to do that, your job is to bring the best you can to the table for them to help them do that. So, and if you do that, people appreciate you and they appreciate the company. So, it gets back to the point is pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. Aristotle, 384 BC, he told us the magic formula. If we can put pleasure in the job, we'll get perfection in the work. The Dalai Lama quote, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. So, if we take some principles like that and apply them in business, it can work. And again, that doesn't mean that, you don't have to make tough decisions, because sometimes you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had sort of 4 questions that you say that employees ask themselves to kind of assess if their own job is giving them pleasure. Am I loved? Am I acknowledged? Am I seen to be doing my best work? The 4th one is what really stopped me in my tracks. Is the person who is coaching or leading me not only loving me up, but also brave enough to be able to help me be my best self?
Correct.
Right. So there's the backbone of steel is necessary for the heart of gold.
Exactly. And, that statement is kind of aligned with the one I shared from Ron Carusi, but, it's something that where that falls down is where we haven't been clear around expectations. In 2009, I wrote a book with Dr. Ken Blanchard called Helping People Win at Work. And the byline is, I'm not here to mark your paper, I'm here to help you get an A. Mm-hmm. And most people let people down because there's not clarity around what does an A look like. And when there's no clarity around expectations, having that redirection conversation becomes very, very difficult. And that's where the leader or the coach tends to protect their own comfort zone instead of having the conversation. So it all starts with, what do we expect from each other? And are we clear about that? And that makes the conversation around redirection, or if you will, coaching and helping, a lot easier than if we haven't had clarity around that.
And my first exposure to the corporate development world was with a New York City investment bank during like the late 90s when, everything was great, everything was flush. And they had, investment banking at that point had the pick of the cream of the crop of academia. And these young people were coming in, and there was tremendous problems with accountability, with clarity of expectations, with their managers. And one of the things we realized is that the best students had it drilled into them that you don't ask what's on the test, because that's brown nosing. And we realized how much of schooling trains people to, don't collaborate because that's cheating. Don't depend on someone else because that's you're too vulnerable. And don't ask questions about what's going to be on the test because that's brown nosing. And it was kind of the opposite of what actually works when we're trying to get things done.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing about, don't mark my paper, help me get an A. When Ken was a university professor, he used to give out the final test paper at the beginning of the class. And, the administration and the academics would say, what the hell are you doing, Blanchard, giving out the final paper? He said, well, because what I'm going to do for the next 3 semesters is help them learn the answers, because my job here is not to mark their paper. It's here to help them learn the answers or help them get an A. And how true is that? I mean, well, why not?
Yeah, well, it doesn't work in a scarcity mentality where the A is a signifier that you deserve more than somebody else.
Right. Right.
So I'm curious. You're 3 years away, I think, from being the CEO. You're now emeritus. You've written this book. Your last chapter or epilogue is the beauty of the void and how to fill it with gold. What are you up to these days that's new and exciting?
Well, I have a very clear purpose. I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happier, more connected world. And I do that through my coaching. I coach CEOs. I have, I think, 6 or 7 that I coach right now. I speak on this subject. I've just finished the book. And the only reason I wrote the book, and, I've got to also thank my co-author, Martha Finney, who, I often say she took my threads of thoughts and weaved them into this tapestry that is so beautiful, is because I believe that business has an opportunity, but more important, a responsibility to make a difference in the world. And I'm hoping that, those leaders that pick up this book will say, you know what, any dumbass can do this. I'm going to have a go at building a great culture. This book will give me some of the ingredients I need and the confidence to go do it, because we did it. I mean, as you know, Simon Sinek's a good friend of mine, and I love his work, and he says, he shouldn't have a job, is what he says, because we should be doing this. And and I think that's so true. He is so on the mark on some of the theory that he puts out there that we actually prove to be true, that we prove to work. But whether it's him or Ken Blanchard or Marshall Goldsmith or all these folks that have been out there talking about this, they've often said to me, you do, or you're doing what we preach. So you're proving that it can work, and it does work.
Hmm. So I want to ask one more question that I'm not sure it's entirely respectful, but it's coming from a place of like me really wanting to understand and believe, and it's so we can create wonderful cultures, and yet businesses go out in the world and do things. And you've already referred to this around, I'm not going to put a Prop 65 chemical in my stuff, but what about companies that make products that kill people, or can you, like, I've seen companies like, well, we have a happy inner environment, and yet we're exploitative of the environment of other people. Are there responsibilities for business beyond even shareholders, customers, vendors, like just to the planet, to the bigger world?
Yeah, one of our values was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships, and that helped us reflect on the fact that those relationships are with our customers, our end users, the environment that we're given the permission to operate in, the shareholders that trust us with their investment, the communities that we serve. So, I'm not going to be the judge or jury about how other people make decisions and what they do. That's way above my pay grade. What I am going to do is continue to say that if you make a decision on what you want to make and sell, or what product. I think it's amazing to me to think that somewhere within a few miles of us right now, you and I, and we're both in two different continents now, there's a group of people who are going to spend their day trying to hack money out of our bank accounts. I just, to me, that's why would you, and they all know what they're doing. But, the world is not full of, the people who want to always do the right thing. So all I can say is if you're leading a company and people matter to you, you can make a difference in their lives by doing a couple of simple things. And that's basically showing them and treating them like they belong, showing them and treating them like they matter, reducing fear by enhancing learning, being a coach, not a manager, and having a set of values that help set them free.
It's a beautiful place to bookmark this conversation and your work. Could you let people know, can they, aside from getting the book, any dumbass can do it, where else can people find your thoughts and your work and maybe reach out to you if they are in need of some coaching?
Well, there's a couple of things. If people want to go to my website, www.thelearningmoment.net, there is actually a dumbass proficiency quiz. You can take a quiz and you can see what your level of dumbassery is. And after you take the quiz, I'll send you a playbook of 4 things you can start doing in your organization straight away. So go take the quiz at www.thelearningmoment.net, and then follow me if you choose on LinkedIn. I actually have the School of Dumbassery on LinkedIn, which is a group that we formed where people are starting to share their dumbassery lessons. So LinkedIn's a good place to follow.
Fantastic. Garry Ridge, thank you so much for waking up so early for this conversation. So it's rare that I do an interview where it's daylight in Barcelona with someone in America. I appreciate that. And thank you for writing this beautiful, so useful book, and for showing that, the things that we read that seem that they might be too good to be true are actually right on the money. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the work you are doing and have done to make this a more loving, safe, and connected world.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for helping us amplify the need, because life's a gift. We don't want to send it back unwrapped.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you so much, and be well.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap. You can find the show notes with links to everything we talked about at plantyourself.com/622. Movement News had a really fun tournament a weekend and a half ago in Girona. It was a grass tournament. Well, 1 field of grass, 2 fields of artificial turf, but still being able to wear cleats and turn and not have sand go under my feet as I kind of run in place and dig my way down towards the center of the earth felt really good. In fact, a couple of the games were live streamed on Twitch and YouTube, and I'm going to put the links in the show notes. I'm the one without the uniform. So on my team, Bravas, we're either wearing yellow or green, and my shirts are either like the yellow is actually kind of green screen, and the green is a different color, so you'll be able to see me. I'm wearing a yellow cap, and I run like I should be using crutches. I'm a lot slower than most of the younger people, but if you're interested, you can see our games there. Going back to the beach for training 3 times a week, taking it down a notch. I feel like maybe I've been doing some overtraining, and I'm working with my trainer to give me more breaks between sets. So I'm going to be working more anaerobic in the trainings, and I'm going to add a couple of runs a week, getting back into some light running. That's about it for me. Got some great episodes in the can. I got 2 more in the can, so I can, without having to predict, can say you're really going to enjoy these next couple of conversations. And I look forward to seeing you back here. Not really seeing you, but it's a polite figure of speech. Anyway, as always, be well, my friends. Let's take this home with some gratitudes. First of all, thanks to Mama Earth. You have been so very, very good to me. Second, Will Ridenauer donated the use of his beautiful song Sabali Dong as the theme music for this show. You can find out more about Will's music at willridenauer.com. Third, thanks to all the patrons of the Plant Yourself podcast for your financial support. You can read the names of all the patrons at any show notes at plantyourself.com. If you would like to become a patron to show your gratitude for the work I'm doing and help support it, you can do so at plantyourself.com/gift. That's GIFT, all lowercase. And finally, I want to thank you, the listener, for making all of this possible, for giving me a reason to reach out to people, to have conversations, to edit, produce, publicize. All the stuff that I do is for you, so that we can continue to have conversations and continue to ripple out healing and transformation into the world.